Cristian harnesses his illustration skills to foster and initiate campaigns that seek to make the world a more equitable place. And since a very young age, he has held his view that sometimes, and that is sometimes, some rules can be bent if the intention is to seek out the betterment of the world. Today, Cristian is going to inspire us on how we can contribute to make the world a more sustainable place by kickstarting our own climate action project. As such, delegates, please join me in giving a warm welcome to climate activist Cristian Fleming.
Okay, so how do I start with this? So they got in touch with me a couple of years ago, a long time ago, to do this, and I've had 2 years now to think about the answer to this question. And I think that the most important thing that I always came down to with this is it's not about the project, it's about the motivation. So I think the thing I want you to know is believe you can do impossible things. So to that end, there's something I wanted to talk about before I start. So I'm a really different person now than I was a couple of years ago, or even the first 46 years of my life. I grew up for 46 years sort of feeling like things were harder than they should be. And then a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with autism. And so that's actually central to probably why I'm a designer. and I like rules-based systems and all that. So this talk is my impossible thing because I really don't like talking in front of people. But don't clap. I think that something else I wanted to say too is really important is that I think that autism and neurodiversity isn't really something to be applauded. We should just be normalized. Like normal people, we're just different. That's all. So I'm sharing this because I think it's important for that neurodiverse people see others like them up here doing things like this. Also, and being honest about what they are, so that we just become normal and not sort of weird in the way that we've been for so long. I think it's also good to know because I might have occasionally struggled with parts of this talk, and I just want you to know there's a reason why. And so, sorry about that. I was supposed to go to that. One thing I'm going to do is forget to advance my slides. So I'm good at what I do. Public speaking isn't it. As a matter of fact, I've never spoken in public before, and so I might be really good at it, but I just don't know, and you're along for the ride. Okay, sorry about that. If it doesn't work out so well. Okay, so also being autistic, I don't engage with people much. It's not because I don't like you. If you tried to talk to me and I sort of seemed weird and didn't really have much to say to you, it's it's not personal. Interpersonal communication isn't really my thing, and I tend to work behind the scenes for the most part for other people who are sort of more out front. And I don't promote myself, so I thought it was really weird and potentially a scam when Mr. Kim emailed me and said he wanted me to give a talk, and I was like, how did you even find me? And so, but he was right. I mean, the subject matter of the talk that he asked me to talk about is exactly what I do. So good scam. So I'm a designer. And I'm going to try over the course of this talk to I'm also going to wear my hat, which might be against the rules, but hats make me more comfortable to be in front of people. And so I wear hats in public all the time. So I'm hoping that I can expand your idea of what a designer is. And I know I don't look like this. I left my top hat at home, and they don't let me drink wine at the UN, so deal with it. So what I do is, first, a public society, yes, but I have a number of clients, and I do a lot of very different things. So one of the things I do is I work with this company right now, often, most of the time, to design and build companies. We design and build climate companies, which is sort of not what you think of when you think of design, right? But that's what we do, and it's pretty esoteric, nerdy stuff, and so I won't get into the details. But also, And I'm working on another thing, which is a project with another friend of mine to do documentaries where we pair hip hop artists with climate activists and scientists. And hip hop artists talked about the places where they grew up and sort of the things they sing about and talk about. And the climate scientists and the artist have a conversation about how climate change actually is related to this, because a lot of what needs to happen to raise awareness about climate change is we have to reach people who aren't paying attention, or they want another avenue, and so that's this. And so these are two really different projects, right? And so I want to start this all by talking about like what even is a climate project, because it's not so straightforward, and there's a lot of different versions of it. So who remembers the People's Climate March? Does anyone? Ooh, boo. It was only in 2014. At the time, it was the largest climate march in history. It was done to coincide with a meeting of world leaders in New York. What I worked on for that, we needed to figure out how to get like hundreds of thousands of people out into the street, and so we looked around and thought like, well, where's the place where the people are? And turns out it's the subway. And so what we did was we basically bought 25% of all of the metro advertising space for a month and just inundated the place with witty comments to get people to pay attention and hopefully to show up. And they did, over 300,000 people. Now I think that one thing I want to like kind of point out is that's a climate project, right? In this picture, there are thousands of climate projects, all under the umbrella of one large climate project, which is the march itself. So climate projects can be, you can have like nested climate projects that go like all over the place, and they can be like, they can have many different forms. Let's look at something else. So this is South Street Seaport in Manhattan, where I'm from in New York. After Hurricane Sandy, South Street Seaport was one of the neighborhoods that suffered the worst effects of Sandy on New York. And in the year following, I was a part of a project called Catch and Release. And what we did is, this is a climate action project. It's not all of them are. I mean, they take many different forms, right? So the purpose of this was thanking people in memory and using the implements of the area as a way of kind of bringing people together to thank each other. So this is what's called block and tackle, which is a fishing technique. And in this fishing technique, what you have is the block, and then the tackle is the rope, and use that to hoist fish out of the water. What we did was used it to invite people into a space where they could thank someone for something that was done for them, and to create this whole like environment where people could go and see the gratitude of people in the neighborhood for each other. And so like that's a really different project than the first project. And so, again, I want to talk about like all the different things that can be climate projects, and it's really big. And they can have different meanings, and they can have different purposes. So this is long line fishing, which is a horribly destructive fishing technique used by tuna fishermen. So, like there are different ways of reaching people, and you gotta like sometimes do stuff that is asymmetrical and weird. And so what we did was, for this, we worked with Greenpeace to come up with this video game based on Pac-Man, where you could, you could learn all about like how destructive fishing fishing processes work. And so it was like Greenpeace versus the tuna pirates. And what you do is you basically just have to run around in these supermarkets, and all the levels were based on supermarkets that were using these destructive fishing techniques. We wanted to teach people about things through a sort of asymmetrical and unusual mechanism, but everything in here, this game, teaches you everything there is to know about the way that these fishing companies work. And you can play it, because it's still online, and we did it a long time ago. So I'm going to talk about the person on the right. Yes, on the right. I get my lefts and rights mixed up. So that's Mary Jo White. She was many years ago the head of the SEC, which is an American financial regulator, and she was at the time, that I sort of crossed paths with her. She had a potential rule on her desk to expose dark money. That's money in politics that's used to kind of push things in different directions by people who have the money, and it's hidden, and oftentimes it's used to suppress climate action and things like that by companies that don't want to do it. So this is Union Station in Washington, D.C. And every day, Mary Jo White walked through Union Station to get to work. And so we were just like, you have an opportunity to be a hero. And so we made a whole graphic novel for her that she could read as she walked through the station. We bought all the advertising in the station and made a graphic novel that she would have to walk past to get to work every day. And then there was somebody who stood at the top of the escalator every day with a cape and tried to hand it to her, and she had to walk past him. And he was never successful. But I think that the reason I want to share this is because climate projects don't always look like climate projects either. This is a climate project, and it's about this sort of this money problem that relates to climate. So consider that the things you do as climate projects may not directly be about the climate. They may seem to be sort of from left field, but they're not necessarily. They're connected. Okay, so this is a beached exploratory drilling rig, and I'll come back to that in a second. I'm a part of an activist group called the Yes Men. We impersonate corporations and try to make them tell the truth so that they can stop us from telling the truth for them. So this is Shell had an ad campaign in it's like 20-somethings. And it was ridiculous. So they didn't talk about what they actually do. They talked about let's grow our own fuel, be more prepared than ever. Let's pass energy on to the next generation. It was just a bunch of nonsense, pretty much. And what does this even mean? And so we, decided that we could help out. They were at the time they were trying to do this exploratory drilling in the Arctic, and they didn't want to talk to anybody about it. They were very quiet about it. There was no publicity. They were just trying to go up there and share nothing with anybody because it wasn't going to be nobody was going to be into it. And so we just thought maybe we should help them advertise to so that they could be proud of what they're doing. So we had while their rig was parked in Seattle, which is northwest U.S., we rented the Space Needle and had a launch party to introduce some new ads for their Arctic campaign. We had an ice sculpture. We had a little drilling rig that poured rum and coke in your glass for you. I mean, we even got bodybuilders. It was a serious event. And then we made some ads for them that kind of followed what they did, but started to take it further. And it just kind of goes on and on until. But this wasn't the best part of the project. What we did too was we made a platform that looked exactly like Shell's website and invited everybody else, anybody on the internet, to do ad copy for Shell's Arctic campaign. And we got some real good stuff. This is from, I don't know who Keith is, but Keith wrote this. Some quality copy here. If you Google Shell Let's Go, all the ads on the first page of Google's image search are ours, not theirs. So like we hijacked their entire campaign. So back to the rig. The best part about this, though, is like, so no one would have known this had happened if we didn't do this thing and everybody didn't kind of run with it. Like it was a thing. It was all over the internet, and we basically just like with like $10,000 or $20,000, we tanked their like multi-million, like 10, 100 million, whatever. I don't know how much money they spent on advertising, but like we ended it, raised a lot of awareness about this, and Shell left the Arctic. And as of 2020, they still have said they're not going back. And so that's billions of dollars that we stopped them from spending or making or whatever they wanted to do. And so, back to what I said in the beginning, believe you can do impossible things. Because, we don't have the money they do. We're just funny, that's all. Okay, let's do something totally different. So, I don't know who's familiar with the Clean Seas campaign. This is a UN thing. I also have done a lot of work with the UN, helped them to develop this campaign overall. There's one part of it that I think is really interesting as a climate project. We wanted to come up with some kind of a way to get people interested in ocean plastic, to learn about ocean plastic. And so we thought, like, we need to come up with something that can travel and something that is like engaging and interesting. And when we did this, VR was still very new, and it's still pretty interesting. But so we partnered with an organization. This actor Adrian Grenier had an organization that was focused on ocean plastic, and they had made this VR experience where you follow a whale around in the ocean and eventually you surface in a garbage patch, so you can get the experience of what it's like being a fish, sort of dealing with this from below. And we paired that with, this is more VR pictures. We paired that with educational stuff and information about the campaign. And there's Adrian Grenier signing the Clean Seas Pledge, which is something you can still do online. If you go to cleanseas.org, it's still there. And one of the most important things we did as a part of this was we kind of lured, because we would do this in places that were being attended by climate ministers, and we would lure them over to sign on to kind of partner with the UN to fight ocean plastic. And we put it all in this geodesic dome because we needed to fit this whole thing into 4 hard cases that could be sent anywhere in the world. And so, and it all had to be sustainable, and it all had to be recyclable or something. Like the only thing that was not was the electronics. And I can't tell you how many times I flew 20 hours halfway around the world, landed a place and found out that one of these cases was missing, and had 48 hours to build this exhibition, and didn't know if we were going to be able to do it because we couldn't find a case. So this is us building this in UN Plaza in New York City. More fabrication. All this takes a lot of planning, and we had a month to do it, which is not much time, so we had to sleep a lot. But this started in New York and traveled all around the world. This is the dome at UN Environment in Nairobi. Here it is in Delhi, India, New Delhi, India. And it's been here, less than 500 feet from where we're sitting. I'm standing, you're sitting. So to bring it back to where we are. And so, I wanted to show a bunch of different things because I think it's important to know these are the things these things have in common. They're all climate projects, but they're all very different. They have different purposes. They have different tones. They have different meanings. Some of them are action-oriented. Some of them are just about contemplation. And so when you think about the climate projects you want to do, don't don't limit yourself. Think big about all the different things you might do. So let's talk more about me. There's a yellow dot in the corner of that, so I can remember that. Like, I just wanted to read something, so I'm gonna do that for a minute. So yeah, I've started a lot of climate projects, so good job, Mr. Kim, finding somebody who does that kind of stuff, who doesn't talk to people. You know, when Mr. Kim asked me to talk about how to kickstart a climate project, I was like, you know, that's kind of a good question. And you know, I've been doing it forever, but I don't really think a lot about like answering that question. And so, you know, it was a couple of years ago when they originally got in touch with me to do this, and I'm like an extreme overthinker. And so I spent 2 years agonizing about how to talk about this, and I like had like nightmares and cold sweats, and I've like rewritten this in my mind a million times. And then, you know, I did it, and then I procrastinated until like 3 days ago, and finally put it all together in 3 days. So let's see. Oh, right. So when I learned I was autistic, suddenly it made more sense to me why I overthink everything. But you know, I learned that autistic people take everything literally, and I'm certainly one of them. So now you know why I spent years trying to understand the question so that I could answer it as accurately as humanly possible. Stop touching this. So as with most autistic people, I fixate on a specific thing. What? Oh, it's that. No, bring it back. I might want to use it. Okay. I fixate on things. You know, you get like one of the like superpowers and also like weirdnesses about autism is you are like basically become an extraordinary domain expert in one like very specific esoteric thing that like nobody wants to hear you talk about all the time. And so like for that reason, this is kind of good because like I want to talk about design all the time. So, you know, like I said in the beginning, I'm a designer. So give me let's enough about me, let's talk about you, all right? So who here is a designer or wants to be a designer or who's thinking about being a designer? Good job, all right. Let's talk about design and what it means to be a designer. So I want to like first talk about what design isn't, and this might be surprising. So, I mean, design isn't graphics or furniture, or architecture, or fashion, or fancy sports cards. It's not the things that are created. All these things are made possible by design process. So here's what I want to talk about is that design isn't just an intentional plan or specification for the construction of any object, system, or structure, or for the implementation of any activity or undertaking. So design is a fundamental process upon which effective outcomes rely. And so, you know, what I want people to understand is whether you're conscious or not, everyone makes design decisions every day, and you're all designers. You just don't know it, and you don't have the tools, right? And so, like, you know, when you decide how to plan your day, your career, you know, what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat, you're designing things, you're designing systems. And so, let's try again. Who's a designer? I want to see every hand come up because everybody's a designer. Okay, great. So let's talk about like how you can harness that. Because now this part of my talk is basically me kind of putting you all to sleep by talking about process for 15 minutes. So get ready. So human-centered design, write that down, look it up. I can't tell you everything there is to know about it, but like it's a really big deal. And if you're thinking about kickstarting projects or starting projects, it's an essential tool. So what is it? It's an approach to problem solving that puts the people you are designing for at the heart of the process by learning from them through interaction and observation from before you begin until after you end a project. So one of the most important things about design or doing things for other people, and that's like all these projects, is the people who you're doing them for need to inform you about how you're going to do it. And if you don't listen to them to begin with, you'll do things that are for you, not for them. And like, you know, they're more likely to fail. So this is important. So there's a few principles that are worth knowing about human-centered design, and they're pretty simple. One is always listen and observe to everything. It doesn't matter what it is, like always be open, be curious, listen and observe. Yes, and this is really important. So you know what we do all the time when we're talking about stuff is we wait our turn to talk, and then we shut each other down. We say like, actually, your idea sucks, and I have a better one, right? Don't do that. Yes, and is a principle that comes from improv theater, and it's, I need to listen to what you're saying and try and build on it, or offer something different. But what I don't do is tell you that your idea is bad and it's not worth doing or whatever. Always like kind of let the ideas be out there. Don't shut things down. Embrace ambiguity. One of the most important things about like starting anything is you start in the dark. And it's scary. You don't know what's going to happen, if it's going to be good, if it's going to be bad. You don't know where it's going to be, and it's stressful. What you want to do is you want to actually learn to find that comfortable. Or not, at least, if not comfortable, at least like be curious about it. I mean, curiosity is a really important thing here. Another thing that's really important, the way to do things that are really amazing is don't think too hard. So we always think about like, how are we going to get the perfect answer, right? And the best answers come through the bad ones. And so like when you just sort of don't let things flow and you kind of like hold on to stuff and you don't like kind of like just put things out there, you ruin the chance to like kind of get through the bad things to the good ones. And so don't think too hard, just like share information. It's all, I mean, you're going to come up with a whole lot of bad ideas. Also, don't be afraid to fail because you will. And that's okay. I mean, I've definitely failed more than I've been successful, and like I'm better when I'm successful because of the times that I failed and what I learned from them. So these 5 principles. Okay, so we're gonna try something here. Can I get 5 people to come up here? No, I'm gonna. So I want you guys to stand in the middle here in a circle. Closer, closer. Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. So this is a warm-up exercise that I do with people. It's sort of to think about these principles that I just talked about. So what we're gonna do is you're gonna say one word, and then you're going to say something after her word based on what she said, or just go with it. If it gets to you and you don't talk for 2 minutes, sorry, 2 minutes, wow, 2 seconds, then everybody clap, okay? So I'm going to actually stand in the middle so that I control the mic. So.
Dance.
Tree.
Yeah. All right.
Fish.
Ocean.
Shark.
Water.
Love.
Mountain.
Pathway.
Whale.
Car.
Hug.
House.
Home.
Apartment.
Black.
White.
Rainbow.
Colors.
Orange.
Good. So that's what I'm talking about. So thank you guys. Everybody give them a round of applause. So that's the way you want to think when you're brainstorming in the beginning of a project. You don't want to think too hard. You want to just like put all kinds of weird stuff out there, because when you sift through all that stuff, you're going to find things that like really work. And all of these principles are included in that warm-up. And so if you're ever going to do any sort of starting, start with warm-ups, like things like that. There's a lot of them. You can like look them up on the internet. But they're nonsense. They have nothing to do with the actual thing you'll make. But they warm you up to be open to just weird stuff. So, how do you start? All right, brainstorming. Am I right? Brainstorming sucked. So here's why. I got. Yeah. Yeah, so when you brainstorm, like, starting is hard, and people often only start projects when they're struck by an idea, but that doesn't actually happen all that often. It doesn't happen on command. So people brainstorm, and what it leads to is like people sort of sitting in a room, like straining, like looking really like sweaty, and like kind of like you got to come up with the right answer. But the problem with that is, the problem with brainstorming is that you're trying to leap to a fully formed answer in most cases without even knowing the question you're asking. And so, brainstorming isn't a very good way to come up with anything. So there's a system for thinking about what you want to start and how even if you don't really have any immediate great ideas, like, I totally messed that one up, right? Let me try again. There's a system for thinking about what you want to start, and this works even if you don't have any great ideas immediately. And all of the projects I showed you before, that I told you about before, all of them were started using the method I'm going to talk about next. So there were no lightning bolts of brilliance in the beginning. There was a process for structuring ambiguity, frameworks. So what's a framework? A framework is basically just a structured exercise that gives you guardrails for thinking abstractly and focusing on process rather than trying to figure out what the big picture is from the beginning. And so I'm going to talk through some frameworks. Get ready. This is going to be pretty esoteric, but it's useful, and if you learn how to do it, it'll make you 10 times better at kickstarting things. So what I do when I'm thinking about starting a project is this is the order I work in. I think about the why. Why am I doing this? That's most important. Who am I doing it for? Who are my stakeholders? Stakeholders. What am I doing? And then how do you got to test it, right? See if it works, and there's ways of doing that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that process. I'm going to talk through some of these frameworks and how you use them. So let's start with why. If you don't have a why, then you have nothing. So start there. But what happens is people often sort of they have one and they don't think about, is that the right one? Could it be something a bit different than that? Should I at least explore that? Abstract laddering, this is a framework. And the question I'm asking here is why am I starting this climate project? And I'm going to use the shell example for this, just for argument's sake. So what I want to do is I want to come up with a statement, right? My statement is I want to expose Shell's exploratory drilling effort in the Arctic, right? So that's one thing. So what you do with abstract laddering is you ask yourself why a bunch of times, and then you ask yourself how a bunch of times. And what that does, so I say why am I trying to expose Shell's exploratory drilling? Well, they're hiding it because it would get bad press, right? And then when I ask myself that why again, say well, why are they hiding it? Because it's an ecological and climate disaster waiting to happen. And why is it an ecological and climate disaster waiting to happen? Because tapping reserves in the Arctic will increase climate damage, right? So what you want to do is you want to build a ladder. So it's called abstraction laddering. And I go from, as you go up in the whys, it gets bigger, the picture gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But what you do, is let me bring the hows. Now, so I say how, right? How am I going to do it? Not why am I doing it? What am not how how is it? I should just how will I expose Shell's exploratory drilling on the effort in the Arctic? Well, I'm going to come up with a creative campaign to expose their activities. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, we could do something funny that engages a lot of people. Okay, well, that's interesting. How are we going to engage a lot of people? Well, we'll partner with Greenpeace to take advantage of their reach, right? So what I've done here is I've created a number of sort of whys. And what I do is then get rid of that ladder. So framework 2, statement starters. This is a really important one too. So I add how might we to the beginning of every ladder item. And so it may require you to change the wording a little bit, but what it does is it turns it into a prompt that you can sort of think, okay, well, is this the scope of project I want to do? Does this ask the question I want to ask? And what you'll do is you'll realize you'll narrow it down to like, you'll be like, you know what? The first question I asked actually isn't quite right because it's not granular enough, it doesn't talk about my activities, right? So I'm going to go down one in that ladder. I'm going to say, I think, how might we come up with a creative campaign to expose Shell's activities in the Arctic? Great. But you can also take pieces from other ones and kind of fuse them together. And you come up with a guiding statement that you can look to and you say, like, whenever, as you're doing your project, all right, I change, and you can also change words too. So I changed come up with to pull off, because, I want to kind of get the right spirit in there. And I just realized I'm only staring at some people over here, and I gotta like look at other people. I'm just gonna look this way now. Yeah, so a statement starter is really important because as you have a project, you want to be able to look back at something that helps you to like make sure you're still answering the same question, because like projects can be big and they can be sprawling. You can wind up in places and you can realize at the end you're not even answering the right question anymore, and you want to always kind of have something to look back at to make sure you're answering the right question. If you're not, if you're consistently like not answering that question, it can also be the kind of trigger for you to say, maybe this is not actually the right question and we should try again. So it's good as a sort of baseline starting place to come up with these statements. So one of the most important things about frameworks is that you chain them together. And so one thing can lead to another, and they kind of like they build on each other to kind of help you arrive at outcomes. And one of the things that's important about it is all this is just process. And there's no brainstorming that happens. Like, I sat in my hotel room and for like 10 minutes and came up with that list of questions. And like, that's how fast this can happen. Whereas oftentimes people will just argue forever about this stuff and you'll spend a whole day and nothing won't get anywhere. These things move you really fast to either failure, which is good, or to the next level. Because if you fail, you can start over. But you want to fail faster, not slow. So let's move to the who. I'm going to move through these a little quicker now, but I just wanted to get really granular with how one of them works. I need some water. So, more frameworks. Right, so this is not related to that project. This is just, I'm showing you examples of these things. So mind maps, that's another framework. How many of you guys have heard of mind maps or used them? They're great for like rapid brainstorming. So let's say it's a who, right? So I'm gonna start with big people categories, right? I'm gonna sort of start with institutions or whole like countries or something like that. And then what I want to do is I want to branch out and break down into as many stakeholders as I can and just get as granular as I can, get down into the individual people levels. And then what I'll do is I should have like something that just like looks like this, and there's like so many different things on it. If I'm working with a group, I often use, and we will use these on Friday a lot, is dot voting. It allows you to really quickly see what people gravitate towards, and if you have some that are like more popular than others, you kind of want to go in those directions and understand that like people have kind of like coalesced around certain ideas, and that's how you kind of move to a next level with this when you have a lot of information. Because one of the things about design process is it's designed to create vast amounts of possible stuff, and then also to give you tools to crunch it down into less stuff and keep on kind of recording it bigger and smaller. So I dot vote, right? So this is, in this scenario, I chose patients, right? And that's the most popular potential stakeholder. So, what's another framework? Something called an empathy map. So let's say what you do with an empathy map is you say you ask yourself the question, what would this person or class of person say? What do they think? What do they feel? What do they do? And so empathy maps are like a really fast way to think about aspects of how you think about a stakeholder might think or act. And at this point, you're just speculating still, right? You're making suppositions about a class of person. So what you do next, and I like do hundreds of these every year, is you go interview them. If you think you know about these people, you've kind of written some suppositions about them in your empathy map. And so what you do is you find people who fit this class, and you go talk to multiple people. Because what you do then is you can find patterns. And interviews can help you to either confirm the things you think you know about people. They can also disprove things that you kind of thought were true in your empathy map, and you gotta get rid of those. And they'll also give you completely different insights about people that you just never expected. But you always gotta interview more than one person, because one person is one person. 2, 3, 8, 10 people. There are patterns in there. Patterns tell you how to speak to large groups of people. And then finally, in this chain, I might make personas of these people, and this kind of like, I'm creating composite people based on my interviews. And so that way, as I work on my project, I can consult. I don't have to go and talk to people anymore. I can consult my persona, which is a snapshot of a person, and ask that persona, like, does what I'm doing actually speak to this person, or am I not doing that? And so, that's an example of a longer framework chain. And one thing I think that's also really important to share too is, like, I shared these two chains for who and why, but they're interchangeable. You can use, these are just puzzle pieces, and you put them together in infinite different ways and structure them in different ways once you understand how they work. And they're just a toolkit. And I think one of the things that's really important about frameworks is they're the basis for how anybody can think like a designer. And to me, I mean, being, I'm a hammer and design is my nail, so like I think everything is design and everybody's a designer. But like, I think, being that design is just the practice of design, of creating with intention, it is such an important skill to have, and frameworks are the tools of designers that can be helpful for you. Okay, so talk a little bit about what, we'll move through this pretty quick. So there's another framework I like called active listening. And what you do in active listening is you just have a conversation. But the thing about active listening is, as you listen to people, write down the things that they say that resonate with you. You can't write down your own ideas. You have to write down things other people say. And so what it does is it forces you to actually listen to each other rather than standing around waiting for your turn to talk, because you've got to write down the things that they say that you like. So let's say I'm in a what, I'm trying to figure out like what my project is, right? And like I said, these are all interchangeable. So this could be an activity for a why or a what or a how, or it doesn't matter. So what I do now after this is I often, once you have your like Post-its up all over the place, like you want to figure out how you what's the story they tell. And so you basically just figure out based on the snippets of your conversation, rather than your preconceived notions about that conversation or elevator pitches or anything like that, you have to just use what's on these little Post-it notepads, Post-it note sticky notes, and figure out what the story of this wall is, which gives you all kinds of new insights into things. And then I might chain that together with something called what's on your radar. Like I said, this is esoteric stuff, and I'm like, don't fall asleep. But I can use something like this, which is a bullseye thing, which you organize your information into sort of tightening circles, and helps you to understand what resonates with people, what's most important, what's second tier, what's third tier. It helps you to sort information very quickly and to understand what's important to people. And then, like I said, these things, you can use these things in any configuration. So let's say I use dot voting again. I find out that people thought that everything in this center circle was really important, but when we did dot voting, I found out that actually the thing that resonates with most people more than anything else is something that's outside of that circle, so it gives you multiple ways of thinking about the same thing, and it can uncover biases and preferences that people hold in their heads and they don't realize they hold opposing preferences, and you can really quickly kind of tease them out and understand like what the dynamic of your project is. So again, another chain. And then testing is just, so let's say I know who I'm doing stuff for, I know what I'm doing, I think I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm doing it, right? So I want to test it out. So I can do something that has the like weird name body storming. And what body storming is basically just acting things out. And so this is something I found on the internet, like you can act out a role of a person, an institution, a luggage. This lady is playing luggage, so she has to act like the luggage. And what that allows you to do is it's kind of a weird, funny way of like trying out whatever it is that your idea is, seeing what works, based on your perceptions of things. And, then you do this thing called rose, thorn, bud. Are you guys overwhelmed yet? It's a lot of stuff. So let's say I did my body storming exercise and I want to know what was good, what was bad, and like what might be interesting. So I do an exercise called rose, thorn, bud, and people share, here's what I thought was good. These are my roses. Here's what's bad. The thorns, we got to change these things. And then, there are opportunities that body storming might reveal that you want to explore. So these are buds, something that somebody might have done or said, and you go like, yeah, you know what, we hadn't thought about that. So let's consider it. Then you go back through the process again. You kind of like just run through it until you feel like you're in the right place. So, last night when I was looking for a good meme for something, I found this, and it kind of like really resonated with me as I like kind of asked myself why it was that I waited 2.5 years to like actually do this presentation. What I'm saying actually is I got a workshop Friday at 11, so whoever's coming, it's going to be good. Okay, so process is great, and I clearly have a problem. I have a process problem. I think about process all the time, right? But let's go a little higher. Kickstarting these projects is not about process. It's about principles and about like, the motivations we have for doing it in the first place. I mean, that's the thing that's most important. If you want to like do this work, then like you have to have these things. So I'm going to share some that I think are really important, that are important to me. So, as I mentioned before, you always start with your why. Why are you doing this? If you can't answer that question, don't start yet. You want to understand that question. And like I said, there are tools to sort of interrogate yourself about like, am I at the right why? There is no one way to do anything. And so, don't get stuck on things. Try a lot of different things and give space to a lot of different ways of doing stuff. Collaborate with each other, which is, means listening. It means sort of being open to being wrong, having good-natured arguments without them turning into fights. Default to curiosity about everything. And this is something I wish that people would do with people, because I've noticed more now than ever before, like the prejudice against neurodiverse people. And I wish that people were just curious about me rather than sort of like, he's just weird and or like, angry all the time, he doesn't smile much, like didn't talk to me at lunch. Be curious about each other, about everything. Be curious about everything. Have lots of terrible ideas. Proudly. Just do lots of bad ideas. It's really important to have bad ideas because bad ideas are the beginning to good ideas. And if you just want to have great ideas all the time, it's not possible. You're gonna have like 1 billion times more awful ideas than good ones, but you gotta have the bad ones to have the good ones. Don't be precious. What that means basically is let things go. Not everything's gonna work. Sometimes you have an idea, think it's gonna be the one that you're gonna go with, and you want to hold on to it because you feel so strongly about it. And the thing is that there's an infinite pool of ideas out there, and so let things go sometimes. There's always more. Think big. as big as you can imagine. Also think small, because details matter. Argue passionately, but don't let it get personal. Remember this, because like sometimes you really want something to happen a certain way, and somebody says something to you, and you kind of get rubbed the wrong way. You start yelling at each other. You hate each other. It's dumb. Have a beer. You're the ones you've been waiting for. Don't wait for somebody else to like tell you how to start something. Do it yourself. You know, like that's it. Internalize the joy of struggle, because this work is hard. It's miserable. You fail a lot. You know, you're gonna have a lot of bad days, and you have to find something amazing about it, and like what makes it worth doing. You know, and to me, it's process. Of course, it's process, because you know I'm a process robot. But you know, I love it. You know, even when it sucks. Here's the reason why. If we go into an argument with somebody we don't even know them, and we start yelling at them and telling them to like take our side, all we're going to do is make it more likely they'll never listen to you. And so like what you want to do is you want to like learn from them. The closer you get, the more you talk. Like they may have ideas you think are really terrible, but the closer you get, the more empathy you give each other, the more you do change them, and it happens naturally because they care and they trust you. Give each other space to get it wrong, because you're going to get it wrong all the time, and it's okay. You know, have some empathy. Take time away to recharge. The struggle will always be here, so go on vacation, have a good time. Like, you know, it'll be here when you get back, promise. Be kind to each other. You know, have empathy for each other, have empathy for everyone, for people, again, like people you don't know, people you don't like. You know, be as kind to them as you can. Also be kind to yourself, because again, this is hard work, and it's easy to beat yourself up and to just exhaust yourself and burn yourself out. Be vulnerable. So this is like, you know, to come back to like why I'm here doing this is like, you know, I like talking about design, and I like doing stuff for climate stuff, but like, you know, to share that like I'm autistic is a hard thing to do, and I don't know how people internalize that. Recognize, and again to this, like recognize that your most difficult challenges are also your greatest assets. Again, like I have like all kinds of like issues doing day-to-day things, but like my fixation that comes from, you know, being autistic is the reason I'm here and the reason I do what I do. And lastly, believe you can do impossible things, because it's only when you believe you can that you do.
Hi, I'm Ashley from Perth, Australia. I loved your slides and you're very inspirational. Thank you. My question is around specifically the Shell Let's Go project. Were there any legal retaliations in that?
No, they avoided talking about it because they didn't want anybody to know that they were doing it in the first place. So they ignored us, and that's how we hijacked their advertising, is because they just didn't stop us. They just acted like it wasn't happening.
So if you worked in Shell, would you have been able to also lead or participate in that project without being caught?
If I worked at Shell?
Yeah, like.
I mean, no, Shell would fire me if I worked on that project.
Is there a way that I could do something similar without getting caught? I work in mining, so.
You want to be caught, though, because here's the thing. Shell was in a really bad position. They were trying to hide this activity they were doing that they knew was problematic, that nobody would support. And they didn't respond to us because they thought that would get it publicity. Because usually what happens when we do those projects is like somebody hits us with a cease and desist or whatever, or they do a press conference, they say, we're not these people, and that's kind of what we want them to do. And so Shell just said nothing because they were just like, we just don't talk about it. Maybe like nothing's going to happen. And there are a lot of like, at least in the United States, there are pretty strong First Amendment parody laws about impersonating corporations. And so like we've been sued, we got sued once by the US Chamber of Commerce. They spent 4 years trying to sue us, and then the judge asked them to open their books, and then they like dropped the suit because they didn't want anybody to know about their finances.
My name's Maddie. I'm from Melbourne in Australia. My question for you is, where is all the funding for these projects coming from? And what would your advice be to people like ourselves who are just starting out and also, want and need funding for our own projects?
So sometimes there's no funding. In some cases, we do work with NGOs or, people who, just like what we do. I mean, we have the benefit of having been at this for, the last 20 years or so. And so, we've pretty high profile with people who are willing to fund us. I mean, I think when you start, when I joined that group in 2007, and they'd been at it for like 7 years before. I mean, they didn't have any money. They made a fake website, and it confused people enough that somebody thought they were a part of the World Trade Organization. They got invited to some industrial slavery conference or something in Finland, and did a crazy thing with they paid for their own tickets. So you don't need money to start. You just need to really want to mess with the system.
We have a lady, walking to the mic. If you can ask your question, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think one thing that I've learned is that process is not perfect, but we should internalize the struggle and enjoy it. So my concern is on the phase 4 of the HCD in regarding to prototyping and testing. Mm-hmm. How can we bring out from the stakeholders who have an intersectional or correlation? So for example, we have parents and children that we really want to come out with a climate solution, but we need both consent and to find ideas. So what can we do in this process for us to have a co-ownership to accelerate long-term climate solutions? Thank you.
Wow, I don't know the answer to that question. So here's my request to you, because I want to answer the question, but I think it's something that I need time to think about. Can we talk afterwards, and I can get that and write it down? I can spend some time thinking about it, because I don't know exactly how to answer it, but I know that I will have an answer if I spend some time thinking about it.
Let's take the next question. Yes, with your hands up, please go ahead. So on.
Quickly before I ask my question, can I just suggest something that will make this whole event a bit more neurodiversity friendly? It's very easy. Don't know if the UN has done this before.
I'm very happy for you to come and speak to me after Christian's session. So
Okay.
we'll take the next question.
It's just to click instead of clap. It's less.
I'm actually okay with you saying it, because like I said, I feel that a lot of the things that people kind of shut neurodiverse people down and sort of say, well, we'll do this in private afterwards. I don't think that should happen. So I think you should say what you're going to say.
I think it makes sense to give applause at the end of speeches, but there's a really long history with this thing called snapping, and you might have heard of it, but because applause is really overwhelming, sensory-wise, and if you click when you agree with something or you like something instead of clapping, it doesn't interrupt the speaker, and it's also less disruptive for everyone who's got their own thought processes happening. I just thought, if if anyone wants to get on that.
I also think this is really important too, because I know that sometimes that these things can seem silly to people. I'd be like, well, that's dumb. It's not. It's again sort of curiosity, empathy, sort of trying to understand be curious why that is the case. Maybe you can learn things about the way different people experience things sensorily. Thank you.
That's okay.
Oh wait, were you gonna also ask a question?
Yes, that was just a quick little thing. So I'm autistic as well, and I'm not used to speaking out loud, but I'm doing it here because I'm masking. But so my question is how, for you as a climate activist who mostly does stuff behind the scenes, how do you balance the expectation to come to the front and be loud and present in this way when it's sort of a neurotypical expectation with, you know, where your values are and what you feel is the most important work. Like, it's obviously good to hear from neurodiverse speakers and voices, and we've got a lot to offer. But personally, like, I struggle because people expect me to be loud. And I wonder how you sort of navigate that so that you don't get like autistic burnout or...
I spend a lot of time by myself. And I think that like when I like before I got my diagnosis, I thought like, you know, I tried really hard to spend time with people and I was really bad at it and I hated it. And like, you know, I wondered what was wrong with me. When I got that diagnosis, I like actually learned that like I don't really like people that much. I mean, not that I don't like people, but like spending time around people makes me like I get exhausted really fast, and I seem like irritated and annoyed. I kind of like look like I don't want to talk to anybody, and like and so like I give myself the space to just be alone a lot. And I've like my wife is actually a really wonderful person too, and she like supports all of this and like reads books and about like every one of like any one of the everything that I've ever been diagnosed with. Because if you're autistic as a if you don't get diagnosed until you're an adult, like you get diagnosed with all kinds of crazy stuff that actually isn't you. And so my wife is like kind of stuck with me through all that and like through some like really like weird behavior. I don't really sleep. I take naps on the couch. Well, and then I come to bed sometimes too, but it's like she just accepts that, and so it's good to have a partner or a person or people in your life who are also just not like they don't like you can be whoever you are going to be, and they'll just be curious about it. Hopefully, you have that. It's hard to find, I think, but like I think that to come back to like why I want to do this is, I think that the sort of like discomfort with being in front of people is also like. That's something that's given to you by other people who like don't sort of kind of just treat you like they don't want to see that. And I think that if people who are neurodiverse are normalized, then it's not as difficult for us to be here. It's not as uncomfortable. It's not hard. It's not as hard because like we're not worried about what people are going to think of us. And I've actually, I'm almost 50 years old. I don't care what anybody thinks of me anyway. It's like, I'm getting old, and I'm just like tired of caring about like what people think of me.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. So we also had a question from Valade. No? So on this side of the room, yes?